The Medium is a third-person horror game developed and published by Bloober Team. It follows in the vein of previous Bloober titles such as the Meh Blair Witch, The Pretty Good Observer and The Masterful Layers of Fear. I think it's a fair bet to say that Bloober Team have found their niche.
It all starts with a dead girl.
The Medium places you in the shoes of Marianne, a medium who's called out to an abandoned Polish resort park after receiving an ominous phone call. The resort, called the Niwa Resort, was the scene of a massacre some years ago. Marianne puzzles her way through the resort, discovering various clues and unlocking more and more of the true nature of what occurred at the resort and why you were called there. The graphics are quite good. The Medium won't be bowling anybody over with intense levels of detail, but there's definitely a good deal of effort put into the artwork. But the game does have some optimization issues, and there's a good deal of grumbling online about how the game runs poorly on higher end setups and that it lacks an ultra-wide screen mode. For the most part, however, the game will be played out either in a dark greyish real world or a dark brownish spirit one, or both. And while both worlds are perfectly serviceable, they're not very inspiring or interesting. The music is dark and oppressive and lines up perfectly with the environments and is a real treat, especially coming from Silent Hill composer Akira Yamaoka and Arkadiusz Rykowski, who has worked on most of Bloober's previous titles. One of the main themes of the Medium is duality, and this is expressed in the most literal sense with the graphics. Marianne's gift is shown as her existing in two worlds simultaneously. The real world screen shows us the physical signs of the atrocity, the damage, the decay and the destruction caused. In the spirit world we get to see these signs in a more abstract form. Tentacles appear, the walls of the faces of the dead embedded into them, and every surface has a slick, unclean feel to it. It also displays actions in both worlds as well, for example using a bolt cutter to open a gate in the real world, as well as Marianne slicing through a stitched flesh wall in the spirit one. Another example is a clock in the real world can control the passage of time in the spirit world and can be used to solve certain puzzles. There's also out of body sections which are like time challenges to complete, as Marianne can't stay out of her body for very long. Other than the solving of puzzles, you'll also be tasked with releasing the trapped souls. Helping them to cross over will unlock various items and areas as well as more of the history. The controls are simple enough and don't hinder you as you pick your way through the rubble of the Niwa Hotel, although they can be quite clunky at times, particularly in scenes that feature a lot of camera cuts, such as the chase scenes.
I'm sorry you had to go through all this. It's time for you to find peace. Bernard.
Thank you.
Huh. It kind of looks like the one I used to get through the mirror. Feels like it too.
Stay with me. Stay.
No! No!
Where is she? Do you not come?
Thankfully the story is a deep enough one to keep you going through all of that. I really did want to find out more about what had happened at Niwa, and it's paced well enough so that you're always just left wanting a little more. In terms of horror, the game does a remarkable job of it. Thankfully, Bloober Team have decided that jump scares aren't a good basis for horror and have gone with a dark and atmospheric tone throughout the game to establish the fear, and the haunting soundtrack perfectly reinforces the gloom, making you feel trapped and pursued gradually without you really noticing it until you're a bundle of nerves and you have to switch off for the night, and then you're debating if you should be sleeping with the lights on. Although there are a few jump scares in here, they're few and far between and really well used, in particular one in the opening hour of the game that legit had me jumping out of my seat and dropping my controller. The voice acting is quite good, the sound design is very well done also, and I really cannot say enough about how great the music and the soundtrack to this game is. Unfortunately, we've reached the high water mark of my positivity about the medium. Mainly, while the story of the hotel is deep and engaging, the characters are far much less so. Marianne has supposedly been a medium her entire life and yet is constantly scared of everything that goes on around her, as if this is the first time she's seeing anything. She states that she has helped over 1,000 souls cross over. How has she never encountered one that was angry or violent? She seems also completely unaware of any of her powers. How did she not know she could create shields or power electrical items with her spirit energy before? It's almost as if she's never attempted to explore her powers at all throughout her entire life. Even if she had, we wouldn't know it. We're given little to no information about how Marianne was brought up or any details of her life, and therefore have no idea why she's reacting the way she is to anything. The same goes for the character of Thomas that we control for a brief period. In fact, the character has the largest amount of backstory, is a paedophile art teacher that the game goes to excessive lengths for us to sympathise with. No other character is given the sheer amount of detailed backstory he gets. It's ridiculous. His story touches briefly on the topic of atrocities committed in the Second World War, but it doesn't touch on them in a tasteless David Cage kind of way. It's woven deeply into his narrative, and regardless of whether or not you sympathise with him or not, you can't say it's not done very well. My issue is, why wasn't this level of detail given to the fucking lead character? I suppose my main issue is that the game has a great idea at its core, yet manages to be so rote and by the numbers. Outside of the dual worlds mechanic, which is only used in about a third of the game and half of that is cutscenes, there's nothing here that pushes any boundaries. This is a slightly above average game with a short playtime, mundane gameplay, a simple story, forgettable characters, and a really good soundtrack. Now while I agree it's not a bad game, it's definitely not worth full price. If you like the look of the gameplay trailers, not the live action ones, they're absolute fucking garbage. And if you can get it cheaper, then I recommend you do that. Otherwise, I'd wishlist this one and wait for the sales.